Hello everyone, welcome to New England College Business Innovation Room session. We're going to be talking, or Christina Inge is from Thoughtlight, and she also does Sleek Marketing University, and she can talk about kind of her background as well. She's an instructor here at New England College of Business in the digital marketing program, and she has lots to say about beyond clickbait today. So welcome, Christina.
Thank you, Janine. Welcome everybody tuning in as well as here in the room. As Janine mentioned, today we're going to be talking about how do you get the maximum ROI from your digital advertising, as well as whether digital advertising is worth it. You know, I've been running Thoughtlight, which is a digital marketing agency, and Sleek Marketing, which is training for small business people in digital marketing for coming on 3 years now, and we often hear people saying either we advertise right now and we don't know whether we're getting any sales out of that advertising, or we advertise right now and we know we're not getting any sales, or I don't believe in advertising anymore because it's all gone over to social media. And so people are leaving money on the table, leaving opportunities for their nonprofit on the table because they don't know how to advertise the right way. And so they're either advertising without necessarily getting much ROI from it, or they are not advertising and missing out on reaching their potential audience. You know, the other thing is we're seeing a lot of what is called clickbait. In other words, headlines that don't necessarily reflect what you're going to see when you click through. Everything from all of those ads for the one weird trick to lose weight, to you won't believe what Kim Kardashian or someone said a few minutes ago. And people click on it and then they don't see what they thought they were seeing and they feel deceived and they go away. So clickbait has gotten a very bad reputation because people think of it as something that's deceptive, and yet when people see advertising they think that it has all fallen into clickbait. In other words, people being subjected to deceptive advertising, and so it's given advertising a bad reputation. So today we're going to talk about how do you go beyond clickbait. How do you go beyond driving people to your website with deceptive tactics or tactics that don't necessarily work, and how do you use advertising in a way that is effective for you, whether you're with a for-profit or a nonprofit. So this was the old way of advertising. Blast and hope. You know, there's an old saying in marketing, 50% of my advertising is wasted, and I don't know what percent. Because people would put ads on TV, on the radio, they would take out print ads in local newspapers, and they didn't know if any of that was working. Because, yeah, maybe you saw an uptick in people walking in your store or donating to your nonprofit, but maybe you had 3 or 4 or 5, 6 ads out there on different channels, radio, TV, if you were lucky and had a lot of funding, print advertising, local and national print advertising. And you would do an ad campaign. You would maybe plan all of your marketing out at the beginning of the year. You would decide, okay, in the spring we're going to be doing advertising around our spring fundraiser or our new floral product line. And that is a very solid and strategic way of approaching things. But once you set that calendar, in the old days it was set in stone. And so you would be putting out ads at the end of the year that had been designed at the beginning of the year, and regardless of what kind of economic conditions were going on later on in the year, regardless of how consumer tastes were changing, regardless of what your competitors were doing, because the cycle of creating advertising was so long, and because advertising was so expensive to create, you really couldn't change your strategy in response to real conditions on the ground. You know, there was a day not too long ago when ad agencies or in-house marketing departments would plan marketing campaigns and start shooting the photography or the video for them. In those days it was film and not even video, months in advance before people even saw the ads. And that is still the case somewhat nowadays, but not as much. And one of the downsides of the old way of marketing and the old way of advertising is that you really had to target your message to a very general audience. TV ads, radio ad spots are very expensive. They reach millions of people at the same time, but those people could be anybody. They could be 20-somethings, they could be retirees, they could be men, they could be women, they could be wealthy people, they could be modest income people. And all of them, you would have to create an ad, especially if it was in a mass market newspaper or magazine or on TV or the radio, that appealed to all of these people. You would have to have a very general, very broad message that would appeal to everybody, and you would have to then send it out to everyone. So let's say you internally knew that women buy twice as much of your product as men do, or people in cold climates buy twice as much of your product as people in warm climates. But you couldn't target your advertising to those specific demographics unless you then took out a bunch of ads in niche publications, maybe in women's magazines, men's magazines, regional newspapers all around the country. And you paired that with your general message, which led to a message being a bit disjointed and still not very targeted. And so what if your message went over like a lead balloon with your target audience because you hadn't thought it through? You had just wasted a lot of money and spent a lot of time on advertising that wasn't effective. Now, the internet came along. Many of us remember when it came along. And people started doing essentially what they had been doing and what they still often are doing in print and radio and television, and they were doing it online. Creating a general banner ad and taking out banner ads all across the internet. And they were identical ads, and they have very low click-through rates. Does anyone want to hazard a guess what the click-through rate is on a just general banner ad that's just all over the internet, not targeted? Less than 0.3%. People just don't click on them. They are basically digital litter. And people were wasting a ton of money. Now, obviously, the very first online ads got clicked on because people either didn't know they were ads or the novelty factor was there, but those days are long gone. And so, too, are the days of blast and hope. Instead, now we have data saving the day. And if you are an NECB student, we have a course on big data and marketing analytics that's going to go into a lot more detail than this course than this workshop does. But to give you a quick overview, we now have a huge amount of data on our consumers, both internally, and we can match that data with external sources of data. So in other words, let's say you know women in cold climates are your best customers. Let's say you make boots. You have 8 different styles for women, 2 different styles for men. Obviously, your product line is resonating more with your female audience, and obviously, it resonates more with people in cold climates. Now, instead of just blasting the entire United States or all of North America or all of the developed world with an ad for boots, you now know exactly who's buying your boots. And it's not just women in cold climates. Let's say it is women making over $80,000 a year who live in cold climates who also buy fine tableware. You know that about them. You've done extensive research, you've talked to your consumers, you've been able to take a list of people who've bought your products, uploaded it to any of the number of data brokers who are out there, many of them very reputable, and they've been able to tell you what the buying patterns are of your customers. Well, now you can use that information to target just that ideal customer with an offer tailor-made for them. You can go on Facebook, you can go to any number of ad networks, and they will find you an audience that matches the audience that has already proven to be your best customer. It could be males, 18 to 24, who are video gamers are your best customer. They will find those people for you and only show your ad to those people. And that's what I mean about data saving the day. Instead of blast and hope, instead of trying to market to everybody and be all things to everybody and just hope that the right person sees your ad at the right time of purchase, you can now use data to target that exact consumer. But you can do more than just target the right demographics of consumers in terms of age and buying pattern. You can also target them using many ad networks at the point at which they are more likely to buy from you or after they've already had a positive interaction with your company. So I want to share a case study from my own practice, that a client of Thoughtlights. They're a manufacturer of a consumer good, and they were targeting people who fit the demographics of their typical buyer. We had worked for weeks and months. identifying who their target buyer was, they're a new company, matching the data with who is out there in terms of age, income level, and finding their ideal consumer. And we were getting respectable click-through rates and respectable conversion rates, but we could always do more. We can always do more for our clients. And so then we started to decide to use retargeting. Now, retargeting is when you show an ad not to the general populace of people who match demographically your ideal consumer, but to specific individuals who have already been on your website. You can also do different kinds of targeting. Beyond retargeting, you could target people who have already shown intent to purchase your type of product by browsing your competitors' sites. That's a little bit more complex, but it's something you could certainly do if you're in B2B and you're selling a high-ticket item. You can also do it with consumer goods, but what we were able to do, simply by taking those exact same ads and targeting them towards people who have already been on the site, is a 4-fold increase in conversions over 10 days. 4-fold. Because instead of just targeting affluent female consumers, we were targeting the ones who'd been on the site. We could also target people who match the demographics of those who had been on the site, and that's still valid. Because you don't want to go just in one direction or the other. So in other words, if you're targeting people who are only at a certain spot in the buying cycle, or only those who have gone to your website, you're going to miss out on new consumers, and you run the risk of creating an echo chamber. So even though you get a 4-fold increase if you're retargeting people who've already been on your site, shopped, browsed, have brand recognition and brand familiarity, you are going to want to, what I call, waste a little money. And when I say waste a little money, I mean you're going to also market to people who fit none of these categories, but are a new audience for you. Because if you do just one or just the other, you're not going to get fresh consumers. And if you're selling something, in the words of the guy who founded Gillette Razor, he said, sell something people need once a year, and you can do okay. Sell something people need once a month, you'll do well for yourself. Sell something people need every day, you'll get rich. If you're selling something that people don't need every day, then the way to build a sustainable business is not to just keep selling to the same people, because they're not going to come back and buy every day. So the more your product is something specialized or niche or something that's a special treat for people and isn't just sandwiches or coffee or something, the more you're going to need to target a little less for some of your advertising. You're still going to want to target as much as you possibly can. However, you also still want to do some general advertising. But you don't want that general advertising to be completely blast at home. You want to target people who fit the demographics that you've already identified as your chief demographic. There's no one formula for success, but one thing I do recommend is at least half your advertising spend should be focused on getting your people back to your site. That means retargeting people who've already been on your site before, targeting their people in their social network who have similar demographics. So you can also do Facebook lookalike audiences where you upload a list of people who have purchased from your site in the past 30, 90, 120 days, even the past year, and say, I want to find people who are exactly like these people in terms of their age and their interests. You can also target the Facebook friends or the Instagram followers of people who have already bought from you. So you want to spend 50% of your advertising budget on those people. If you're selling something people need every day, that could go above 50% because you want them to be loyal visitors. If they need something every day, like coffee, if you're a coffee shop, you want to target those people pretty much every day. Sure, they bought coffee from you today, but every day is a new day, and they could make new decisions about what they're going to buy if you don't remind them all the time. So if you are in an everyday product industry, you're going to have to spend more of your money on retargeting. However, if you're not in an everyday product, I would say 50% is a safe place to go because you may have consumers who will buy from you once a year. And if you keep retargeting to them, you keep advertising to them, you keep deciding, okay, I'm going to just keep trying to go back to that well, they may get tired of you because they don't really have a daily need or a monthly or a weekly need for your product. And meanwhile, there's people who are demographically similar to them, or who are actually in their social network and to whom they're also going to be speaking and talking about your product. So it's a 1-2 punch of word of mouth and advertising. And if all you're doing is retargeting, you're not getting those people. So then 50% of your marketing budget should go to people who are not your current customers, or not in your current customer social graph, or web visitors that you've had in the past 30 to 120 days. Of that 50%, at least half should be people who are very demographically similar to your consumers. But then the other half, so the final 25% of your marketing spend, should be building new markets. You really have to continue to be doing new markets. It's still not blast and hope. You're not necessarily, unless you're a very big budget organization, you're not doing TV advertising or radio spots, unless you really sell something that's absolutely for everybody. But what you're doing is maybe thinking about, all right, if our current consumer is a woman over 35, maybe what we should do is find that exact same consumer in a younger or older age group, but with the same income level, the same geographic locations, and the same tastes. Identify 3 to 5 adjacent audiences, find them, and use data to market to them. You might want to change different messaging and different advertising, but you do want to keep reaching out to adjacent audiences. So now you want to think about, all right, well, that's great if you know who your audience is, but I don't know who my audience is. We've been marketing for years, and we have all these email addresses or names, or if you are a retail establishment, you've got people coming in the door, you kind of recognize them, but you don't really know who they are. So the first step, if you're going to start targeting people by interests, is identifying who they are. Well, the good news is there's a lot of free and affordable ways to do that. Number one, make sure that you have Google Analytics with demographic information enabled on your site. Everybody should be using Google Analytics, but most people only scratch the surface. They look at top-level metrics, which are often just vanity metrics, such as how many people have come to my site this month versus next month. That's important if you're looking for overall trends, but all it tells you is how popular the homepage or the internal pages of your site are. There's a lot more data that you can get free from Google Analytics, and one of the single best ones is that if you enable demographics on your site, you can look at people by age, you can look at people by geography. You don't even need demographics to look at people by geography. That is one of the standard parts of Google Analytics. You can look at people by their tastes and behaviors. So look at who's coming to your website right now. And then set up what are called conversion funnels. Is everybody familiar with conversion funnels? So for the people who are following along at home, conversion funnels are, you can go into Google Analytics and you can set up a visualization of how people find your site, what they do once they're on your site, and how many of those people take an action that you find desirable. So if you're a nonprofit, that would be donating, signing up to volunteer, signing your petition. I mean, there's a lot of petitions out there right now. So if you're one of the people with one of those petitions, you're going to define a conversion as someone signed my petition. Or if you are an animal shelter, it's going to be somebody, clicked on adopt a pet and looked at maybe 3 pets or made a donation. If you're an e-commerce company, it's going to be really simple. They checked out and purchased something. If you're a B2B company, that's a longer sales cycle, and it could be that they filled out a form asking to be contacted by a salesperson. But you want to look at your conversions, and then you want to look at demographically, time-wise, geographically, who those people are who are engaging in those conversions. Those are your real, true customers. Maybe you'll find that although gamers, males 18 to 24 make up the majority of people who come to your website, it's actually only males 22 to 25 who make the majority of the purchases on your website. And they make the majority of those purchases on Mondays through Thursdays during working hours. Well, that's incredibly valuable information that you just got free from Google Analytics, because now you know that your target demographic is not only young working men, but in fact, they're shopping while at work, maybe on their lunch break, maybe at 3 in the afternoon, maybe they're in a really long, slow meeting, but they're shopping during working hours. Now you now know, first of all, if you're doing targeted advertising by age and gender, geographic location, let's say they're all concentrated on both coasts and major metropolitan areas, you can now easily buy an audience that fits those demographics. But more importantly, you can also cater your ads now to people who are impulse buying while at work. That is a completely different kind of purchase than somebody who is taking a long time to make a decision on a weekend or going into a retail establishment or comparison shopping. If someone's shopping at work, they're probably doing it in small bits of time. They might even be doing it furtively. They are probably doing it on a mobile phone, and you can certainly see if they're doing it on their mobile phone. But the important thing to remember is now you know who is looking at your ads, but you also know when and in what context they're looking at your ads. That can completely determine what your ads look like. So if your target audience is a young man shopping on his phone while at work, your ad is going to have to be mobile optimized. It's going to have to catch somebody's attention like that. It's going to have a really simple conversion path, because it's very unlikely if you're shopping at work that you have a lot of time to take out your credit card, type it in. Maybe you haven't enabled PayPal checkout yet on your e-commerce platform because you didn't think it was necessary. But if you realize people are buying your product on their mobile phones at work, well, if they can pay for that with one click without pulling out their credit card and typing it in, your conversion rate could go through the roof. But you need to know the context in which people are shopping in order to be able to create an e-commerce system or a conversion path, if you're not engaging in e-commerce, that seamlessly enables people to make that purchase, that donation, or take that action. So take some time to look at your Google Analytics to determine who your audience is. But that's not the only source of data. You can also upload, like I said before, a list of people who have purchased from you or donated or filled out a contact me for more information form. You can upload it to Facebook, and they will tell you those demographics, and they will tell you what pages those people liked, and they will tell you what kind of people they hang out with on social media, and then you know how to target them. You can also go to data brokers, and there's many of them out there. Upload a list of your past customers, most recent customers, and find out everything from whether they own a home to where they are, to how many children they have in the home, to what their income is. Use more than one data source if you can. Yes, there's a bunch of free ones. Some of the paid ones are quite worthwhile, but make sure you're looking for several different pointers as to who your customers are and what their behaviors are. I don't just mean really top of line stuff like their middle income. I mean, what time of day are they coming to your site? What else do they do online? What are their interests? However, you don't know for sure whether any of that information is going to work until you do some testing. Otherwise, you are like this unfortunate golden retriever whose glasses are askew, has no idea what he's doing. Well, if you're a golden retriever trying to do chemistry or online advertising, that's probably a challenge. But a lot of us are in the same position as this sweet dog here. We're putting ads out there, and sure, we're not doing blast and hope anymore. We've got demographic data. We know that our shopper is a male in his early 20s buying online via his mobile phone, and we think that because he's doing all of that, he wants to check out via PayPal, and he needs an eye-catching mobile ad to bring him to the site. So that's the kind of ad we put up, and we change our checkout process to enable PayPal checkout, and we can call it a day, right? No, maybe sales are going up. Feel good about that, right? But what if there's more we could do? You won't know until you start to test and hypothesize. So for instance, if this guy's shopping on his mobile phone from work, you're going to assume that you can't use audio in that ad because it's not like he wants everybody at work to hear him listening to an ad. But what if he works all day with headphones on, he takes a 15-minute break, he's drinking his coffee, he's checking his social media, and he's got his headphones on, and he can very well hear your ad, and he's on desktop, not mobile, and the audio from your ad is actually very appealing to him. Now, if you had made the guess that because of this person's demographic and the context in which they are shopping, they are not going to like audio in an ad, you could be leaving money on the table. You could be missing out on conversions because this is a person who may be a minority of that target audience, even if it's 15%, even if it's 5%. If they want an ad with audio, that's going to increase conversions. And the good thing about audio ads, as an aside, is that people can always just have the audio turned off. You're not losing anything by adding audio to your ad, but you could be losing a lot by not adding audio to your ad. But how are you going to know that? Well, you hypothesize. In other words, in this case, my hypothesis is some people are going to want audio in their ads even if they're shopping at work and they're on mobile, because some of them could also be browsing via desktop during their breaks. And then you have to test it. In other words, you have to come up with a purely scientific experiment in which one group, identical to the other group, is subjected to an ad with audio, and an identical control group is subjected to an ad without audio, and then you give it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, although you seldom need to get 90 days unless you have a very long sales cycle and very few sales in terms of sheer volume of transactions. And you test and you see which ad performs better. But wait, there's more. Because how do you define better? Is it volume of sales? Is it the number of people buying, or is it the dollar value of items bought? Because I have seen a lot of ads where one drives more people in aggregate to the site, and the other drives fewer people, but those people make larger purchases. And you're actually making more revenue over the less popular ad because it's appealing to bigger spenders. This can very much be the case when you're dealing with nonprofit fundraising as well, because you might be reaching out to large numbers of small donors or small numbers of large donors. And the appeal for both is completely different. The large donors tend to need more hand-holding. It takes more because this is a real commitment and a relationship and a partnership with your nonprofit, versus the small donors are going to make an impulse donation based purely on an emotional connection with your nonprofit. And so smart nonprofits usually try to reach out to a balance between the two groups, but if you have to prioritize somewhere, you have to define what success is. Do you need a few large donors, or do you need a grassroots groundswell of donors who maybe give $20 or even $5, but who will spread the word about your cause? So before you set out to hypothesize and test, I want you to promise one thing. You will also determine what success is going to look like, so when you run those tests and test different ad styles, you will know what it means when you see, aha, we've got it. Well, what's it? What is the ad that's going to succeed for you? You have to define that, and then you have to keep testing. There's no such thing as you can find the formula. Consumers are very fickle. Donors are very fickle. Volunteers have changing priorities. So if you go out and you say, well, we tested last year, we tested one ad, that ad worked, we're done with testing. No, always be testing. Just like salespeople, their motto is always be closing. The marketer's motto nowadays, the advertiser's motto nowadays, the outreach coordinator's motto nowadays has to always be testing, because what worked last month is not going to work this month. The economy changes, your competitors are always stepping up their efforts to reach consumers, and you have to be constantly staying ahead of the curve as well. But wait, there's more. This is where the clickbait comes in a little bit. So I want to show you a little something in Outbrain. So I promised you that we would go beyond clickbait. However, I'm going to admit I was wrong. I swore people don't want to click on clickbaity ads anymore. And I just proved myself wrong about a month ago. So you remember maybe about a year ago, whenever you went on social media, there were those ads on every mass media publication, from the New York Times down to like Sports Illustrated, where there would be a picture and it would be something like, you won't believe what these celebrities look like nowadays. One weird trick to lose weight. And all over the marketing landscape, the pundits were saying nobody wants to click on clickbait anymore. And the decline of some of these clickbait sites that put listicle articles out there was attributed to the fact that people were wise to clickbait. They didn't want to click on clickbaity ads. So acting on this received wisdom, I started to do a bunch of ads. This was for a wonderful vendor of dinnerware that we're working with, promoting actually their blog. So content marketing, if you look at the work HubSpot has been doing, inbound marketing is very critical, even if you're doing advertising. And by inbound marketing, I mean content driven. You're not pushing your product on people, you're pushing valuable content that they feel is useful, interesting, and informative, and you are sharing that with them to get them to come to the site, like, know, and trust your brand, and then eventually become loyal to your brand and purchase from you. Now, one of the chief ways to integrate advertising with content marketing and inbound marketing are some of these advertising platforms, and one of the ones that I really like is Outbrain. So if you've been on many of the more mainstream media outlets, if you read any news outlet whatsoever, have you seen at the bottom of the screen where it says news from around the web? Outbrain is one of the vendors that provides you with a listing in the news from around the web. So whether you're on the Huffington Post or Sports Illustrated or the New York Times, that news from around the web was not actually put there by the editors of those publications. It is a block of ads from Outbrain or one of these other content advertising platforms. And as you've probably noticed, a lot of these are very clickbaity. Those news from around the web often do say, you won't believe what these 80s TV stars look like now. And you're thinking to yourself, does anyone click on them?
I do.
Yeah, me too. But I had read a lot of articles in the marketing press saying nobody's clicking on these clickbaity things anymore. People are too sophisticated for that. But none of us really are, because these are impulse clicks. So I ran 4 different advertising taglines. One was complete clickbait. You won't believe the ingredients that make these the healthiest cupcakes. And these were actually pretty healthy cupcakes. It was my own recipe, photographed quite attractively for vegan pumpkin spice cupcakes for Halloween. And then I tried what I call the dignified non-clickbaity tagline. Pumpkin cupcakes, vegan and gluten-free. Nice dignified headline, worthy of Cook's Illustrated magazine. No, you won't believe. No, healthiest. Look at the numbers. Outbrain is actually really, really wonderful. I want to preface this before I discuss these numbers. Outbrain optimizes your marketing spend by showing the ad that gets clicked on the most often. So the more people click on an ad, the more that's what gets shown on the web, because it's getting the popular endorsement of all of the readers. And the ones that don't get clicked on get shown less and less, so that by the end of a week, 2 weeks, a month, you can see which ad was the most popular, because that's the one that got the most impressions. Guess which got the most impressions and therefore was the most popular? You won't believe the ingredients that make these the healthiest cupcakes. Then we also did the healthiest Halloween treat, and then this one, pumpkin cupcakes, gluten-free and vegan. Less than half. So what won? Clickbait. Look at the click-through rates. The average click-through rate for this campaign was 0.12%, which is actually roughly quadruple an average banner ad, which is at like 0.3%. But look at this. You won't believe, but with the healthy message woven in of vegan and gluten-free, was at average, which I consider to be failure if you get just an average click-through rate. Then the dignified one at least did a little better than that with a click-through rate of 0.9%. But look at the click-through rate on the, you won't believe the ingredients that make these the healthiest treat. 0.12%. Then 0.14%. 32,991 impressions. And this is what I mean about how you can spend only $100 and drive a ton of traffic to your website. Look at what ended up being the spend for this small controlled campaign just to test out these 4 taglines, and look at the traffic and the eyeballs that resulted from it. You're looking at less than $100. So I'm not saying all of your more on the web ads should be, filled with pandering taglines like "you won't believe how healthy these ingredients are." However, I do say you should test and not believe any kind of received wisdom, because it depends on your product, your offer, your audience, and it might be that you do need to resort to a tiny little bit of clickbait. Now, it doesn't mean that you should or you shouldn't. Obviously your brand matters as well, but if your consumers are responding to clickbait, you can easily tell with a very small spend using Outbrain. The other good thing with Outbrain is it will tell you where you were placed. So they will optimize your placements based on where the clicks are happening. And they optimize these placements to be on cooking websites. So that actually makes it even a more compelling argument for clickbait, doesn't it? Because, if you want to catch people's attention on the New York Times website, you'd think, well, okay, there I really need to use clickbait because I'm competing with real news and other advertisers, but surely on a quality cooking site, I don't need to resort to "you won't believe these ingredients." I mean, surely home cooks are more sophisticated than that. But clickbait is clickbait. People like to click on it, even as we feel secretly guilty. Now, I would say 90% of the people who clicked on these were probably thinking, "I'm going to feel stupid after I clicked on it, but I stand behind the recipe. It was a really good recipe." But they were probably thinking to themselves, "Wow, this is a headline designed to make me click, isn't it? Darn it, I'm clicking." Yeah, I'm clicking. I do want to know what the healthiest treat ingredients are. And that's the sort of thing that testing will tell you, and you do not have to invest a lot of money in testing. If anything, you can get fantastic results from a very small spend, and you can do it in a very short space of time. This was done just in the few days before Halloween. And this also points to another important factor that I want to share as we go back to my slides, is that you have to be more seasonal than ever. We usually tend in advertising to think in terms of classic seasons, like we're looking at the holiday season right now. But seasons now in advertising, because of social media, because of the quick way in which people's attention spans are shorter and shorter now, seasonality is not about just classic holidays or classic seasonal expectations about, for instance, if you make nacho sauce, you're going to target people who are doing college football tailgating and market during college football season. This isn't about the big seasons. Seasonality can go down to 1 week. You really want to be targeting your ads in increasingly narrow time frames and switching up your ads as much as possible. I would say that once maybe 100,000 people have seen your ad, if your target audience is maybe 200,000 people, switch your ad up. Because enough people have already seen the ad, probably 2 or 3 times, that they're tired of it. So you need to switch your ad up frequently. The good news is this means that you can do a lot more testing and gather a lot more data, because let's say you decide that in addition to avoiding clickbaity headlines, you are never going to stoop to putting a kitten on anything. Well, one day you need to switch up your ad again. It's been seen by 50% of your target audience multiple times. You're afraid they're getting tired of it, and you test out a kitten. It's probably going to drive tons of traffic to your website. If you have more kittens on your website, it's probably going to drive a ton of sales as well. And so you can do these low stakes tests, and because the ad's only around for a few weeks at most, it doesn't matter if you decide that maybe your audience doesn't like kittens. And if you're marketing to people who don't like kittens, you really need a new audience. But you haven't risked a lot, which means that you can get a little bolder. I mean, obviously be very careful of your brand. Don't damage your brand by going way off. But you can play around with it a little, because the ads are much shorter time frames than if you were, for instance, doing a print campaign across all the major fashion magazines throughout the entirety of, September through November. You really have a big commitment there with your brand. So if you're a high-end manufacturer of luxury goods, you're probably going to need to hire a celebrity for multiple millions of dollars to endorse your product. You're going to have to hire the top photographers, and you're going to have to style the shoot. And once that goes to print, months before the magazine's seen, that's it, you've committed to that. And if people decide that they don't like the colors in that ad, because they don't jive with the mood of the country, or if that celebrity gets involved in a scandal that turns off your target audience, you've already committed to that ad and you are stuck with it to the potential detriment of your sales. But with online advertising, you could just show the kittens to people who, for instance, are not your committed core consumer. Let's say we go back to the example of you've got a target audience, core people that you usually work with. For instance, you're a nonprofit that helps children in underserved communities get STEM education. And your main donor is a woman between 30 and 50 who herself has had a STEM education. But let's say you want to reach out to men, millennials, or people with other educational backgrounds. That's where you can start playing with your brand, because they don't already have any emotional investment in your current brand. They've never seen it before. They don't care. You're not doing blast and hope, so they haven't seen your branding. They aren't familiar with who you are. And you can go out on a little bit of a limb and message them with something that looks a little different from your core brand. As long as it's true to your values, your core values of who you are as a company, you can do something that's a little off the wall for you, or a little bit more creative or divergent from your usual messaging. So maybe it's your non-core audience that you try to catch their eye with a cute kitten or something like that. And it's not going to be seen that often by your core audience, so it's not going to run the risk of them saying, oh my gosh, kittens. All right, so you've got all this advertising. You've driven a lot of traffic to the website. What happens then? People usually think that the advertising struggle is over then. You've gotten people to the site. But oftentimes you'll see, okay, well, my traffic's gone up, but my sales or donations have not really gone up a lot. And that's probably because you are not having them come in for a landing page. You're driving people to your home page with your advertising, and I can tell you that that is not always the best strategy. So let's say you are a volunteer organization, and if someone comes to your home page, there's information about your mission. There's maybe some of the latest advocacy that you're doing, like an awareness campaign. There's a call to volunteer. There's a call to donate. There's a call to sign up for more information. All of these are three very different actions. People who donate are not necessarily going to volunteer. In fact, a very small percentage are going to volunteer. Now, if you're taking out a bunch of ads that say, support our cause, donate now, and you've got a potential volunteer coming to the site, guess what? If that volunteer now button is buried on your homepage as one of 6, 8, 10 different options, you're going to miss out on some volunteers because they're not going to know how to volunteer. They're going to get overwhelmed by the information, and they're going to go away. This is all the more critical if you're selling anything online, because once you get past having maybe 100 products, it takes so long to navigate through your site that, let's say somebody saw an ad for a blue dress that you put on Facebook, they click, they get to your homepage, there's no sign of the blue dress there. Now they have to search for blue dress, they get shown 20 different blue dresses. At this point, if they're shopping on their coffee break, you've just lost them. They have to get back to work. They didn't see the blue dress that made them click. They're not going to be able to buy that blue dress. They didn't want the pink cardigan, and that's what they saw when they landed on your homepage, and they just go away. And then they're going to buy from another vendor. So what you want to do is make sure that when you take out an ad that's very targeted and specific, which is what you should be doing, targeted and specific to your audience, you then drive them to a page where they can easily take the action that they came to anticipate when they clicked on the button. So in other words, if you want volunteers, if you go back to looking at testing your advertising and you've determined that your key performance indicator, or KPI, your sign of success, and KPIs again are another term for what success means for an ad or any other marketing initiative. If you've decided that even though you're not going to get a ton of people to volunteer, you need a couple hundred more volunteers, take out an ad that targets people who are habitual volunteers for causes similar to yours, and make sure the button says volunteer, and don't send them to your homepage, send them to a page that says what are your volunteer needs, and here's a really simple quick form to fill out to have someone contact you about volunteering. Because if you send them to the homepage, you've lost them. Similarly, don't keep mixing and matching your landing pages. One of the things I've often found some companies do to save money is say they're going to build one landing page and send every ad to that one landing page. How is that different from your homepage? Maybe it has a little bit less messaging, maybe a little tighter messaging, but you're back to blast and hope in terms of taking out a very general message and sending it to everybody. So in other words, you might have a landing page that talks about your value proposition of your software to the higher ed community. And then you take out that ad and you target, say, K through 12 IT professionals who have completely different needs for educational IT than higher ed IT professionals. And you're wondering why no K through 12 IT leaders are being contacted by sales. You've given them the wrong message because it's just a little bit off, and a little bit off is worse than just sending people to the homepage. I'm quite serious. If you cannot build a custom landing page for every audience that is distinct from any other audience, then just send them to the homepage, because if they see a custom landing page for an audience different than theirs, it's going to be a bigger turnoff than just going to the general information of the homepage. So make sure that you not only create these though, but you're also going to want to test these as well. You're testing an ad, you're deciding which gets the most clicks, but then you also want to test different landing pages. And honestly, there's some companies where they spend millions a year just testing the color of a different buy button or donate button on the landing page that people are sent to, and determining that a blue button sells more than a green button, and an orange button apparently sells more than anything else. The number of tests that orange is like the number one thing. But make sure you're doing testing, because for your audience, orange is not a really interesting button color. So here are the channels I usually recommend people get started on if you're going to do ad retargeting, because they are the most cost effective and they generate the most data. Obviously, social media, Facebook and Instagram collect a ton of information on their users. And you can leverage that information to micro-target ads to people by all of the demographics that we've just discussed. Outbrain, really cost effective, as you've seen, and one of its great benefits is that you get seen in some really high-end media properties, places where you couldn't possibly afford as a small organization, a startup, or a nonprofit to take out a real direct ad. To advertise in real simple magazines, print and online version is going to cost you thousands of dollars, but I've spent like $5 and gotten an ad placed on Real Simple's website through Outbrain. So it's a really, and again, I have no affiliation with Outbrain. I'm not a reseller. I'm just a big fan. There are a couple of other competitors that do the same thing. Pick the one whose interface you like, but definitely I recommend one of these content more on the web vendors. And then you can also branch out into paid search. You can branch out into advertising not just on Google, but on Bing, Yahoo. Certainly if you're targeting a more mature or conservative demographic, there's still a lot of Yahoo users out there. But make sure that you go for the big three. And again, it doesn't have to be this brand, but it should be some mix of big social media channel, content driven, and then maybe pick 1/3 channel, whether it's paid search, if you have either a Google ads grant as a nonprofit, or you're very targeted and very disciplined with your spending, or if you find that some of your content placements do well on a particular magazine's website, or your social media ads resonate well with the fans of a particular media outlet, that's when you can think about doing some advertising with a very targeted niche media publication. You can also look at the Google Content Network, which again, similar to Outbrain and its competitors, places your content on websites. but that tends to not have that more on the web feel and look more like a traditional banner ad. One of the things I want you to take away from this is that advertising is no longer I spend a lot of money and I wait for results. It's very much data driven, it's very much numbers driven, and you want to make sure that you're measuring everything that you do. If you can only do one thing to innovate or change your advertising this quarter, I would say take a look at what ads you have out there right now, look at their click-through rates, look at their conversion rates, and try to weed out the ones that are underperforming and go for the ones that are overperforming. That is an easy way to optimize your ad spend. If you have time to do more, I would suggest going in and looking at the demographics of those who are clicking on your ads and making sure that you can target your messaging to their interests and find lookalike audiences that go with them. But make sure that everything you do is data driven. In other words, make sure you're looking at your numbers, whether it's raw clicks, raw traffic, or sales, and optimizing what you do. But promise me that you'll test. Whether you'll test your landing pages or your advertising, promise me you will test. And with that, I definitely want to ask people if they have any questions, you can ask them now. Or if you have questions later, you can tweet me or you can email me. We deliberately put up this extremely alarming looking end slide to discourage frivolous questions. We did not test it. I should have maybe used a kitten. But this is an example of what you can do that's counterintuitive. We put up a slide that looks kind of industrial, and we're testing it out to see if you guys like it. And it's counterintuitive from what we normally do. And just like the clickbait, just like the clickbait headlines, just like the use of a kitten, it's all about what works with your audience. It doesn't matter what you think is pretty, it doesn't matter what you think is serious or frivolous. It matters what people respond to. So if you get too married to an aesthetic, you get too married to a design or a theme, you're missing out on opportunities. So make sure you do everything with an open mind and listen to your audience, because they're the ones who keep you in business or keep your nonprofit running. And what they say should be what governs your advertising. So with that, I want to ask anybody if they have any questions. Yes?
Okay, so I'm tinkering around with Google Ad,
Content
Google
network?
Ad grants.
Okay.
See, I've not used that before. But also, I'm looking at Outbrain. What is the, compare that to the, or talk about the difference between Outbrain and Google AdWords and Google Search, and like what kind of, because I know you're going to be targeting different audiences, and the differences so that people can understand where to put their money.
Yeah, very good question. If you are a nonprofit and you can get a Google AdWords grant, go for it, because it's free advertising money. So for the sake of the people following on at home, Google has a wonderful program where you can get $10,000 a month in free advertising from Google if you are a nonprofit. Now there are really strict restrictions on the cost of the keywords you can bid on, but it's certainly worth it. So Google AdWords, the classic Google AdWords is, let's say you type something into Google, you're searching for some information, and ads pop up at the top, and it literally says that this is an ad, and it's triggered by people searching on a specific keyword. Like for instance, if I'm looking for animal shelters Boston, and you have an animal shelter, you can take out a Google AdWords ad, and it could say something like, you know, Greater North Shore Dog Rescue, here's our information, donate now. And it drives people to the ad, to your page, to your landing page, from Google, from a specific search that they conducted on Google. Now, if you're looking at Outbrain or some of these content networks, that goes to people where they already are. So they're not searching for an animal shelter. They're reading the New York Times or Sports Illustrated, and that pops up at the bottom as a more on the web. It's made to look like an article, and it's portrayed as an article, and people click on it. Now, it can be targeted based on their past browsing history, but it's not triggered by a specific action that they have just taken. It's not them going out to
Is it
Google.
tied to the article that they're looking at?
Not always, no.
Okay.
No, I mean, because if you go on any of these websites, you could be looking at an article about, who's going to be the Treasury Secretary, and you get a weight loss thing at the bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I went off on Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
From a digital marketing thing.
Exactly. It's just some of
2
it's
hours
just,
later, I'm like, oh, you're doing it.
how did I do this? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's just very general. And then the Google Content Network places banner ads on content websites. They could be anything from somebody's blog that just happens to get a fair amount of traffic. Anybody with a blog can sign up for the Google Content Network and accept ads, and they get a few pennies every time somebody clicks on it. So it can go really broad. It can go all over the internet with ads on both, respected publications like major metropolitan newspapers, all the way down to like a blog that gets respectable traffic. And it is targeted based on both the topic of that specialized blog, if you're advertising on blogs, and that person's browsing history. But it's not portrayed as an article. It definitely looks like an ad.
Okay.
Like I say, if you can, I would do both. Any more questions? Okay. Well, again, this is my contact information. I want to thank everybody who tuned in today for tuning in. These slides are going to be made available, right? Yeah. And definitely, if you want to find out more, sign up for one of our courses. And there's also going to be a ton of information out there on different digital marketing websites, as well as, honestly, if you want to start doing this, every single one of these major advertising channels, I mean, certainly Facebook, Instagram, all of the content networks, Google is tremendous at this. Their own education, their own how-tos are incredible. You can get the certifications, for instance, in Google AdWords, so the education around it is tremendous. I can't begin to tell you how many times people flounder because they just didn't look in the help files. Go and look at these vendors' own videos and educational information. It should be your first step. You can save yourself a lot of wasted effort if you do that and get up to speed much more quickly. And again, after looking in the help, send me a tweet if you haven't answered your own question. Thanks, guys.